Welcome back to Tutorial Tidbits and welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire and this week I have some wet, watery, blue, oceanic rice paper painting to share with you. I've got new designs of printed rice paper with joggles. I've got old designs that are back in stock, so I've got lots of material to use. So if you've got a few minutes, let's go check it out. Welcome to the studio where I'm super excited to announce that my newest printed rice paper designs are available, and they are in a ocean aquatic life theme, and they are printed in blue ink. I'm so excited about this. My previous set of rice papers are wonderful and awesome, and they are also back in stock, and they were all printed in black ink. So by comparison, I'll just show you. The previous ones, like this is Bees and Bugs, printed in black ink, and it's significantly darker and different. I did some botanicals, and I did some postcard U.S. mail themed. And there's 3 designs of each in the black, and there's 3 designs of each in the blue. And the U.S. mail theme and the botanicals are back in stock, but by comparison, I want to show you that the dark rice papers are a whole different vibe being black than these are as blue. So I also want to show you, I have a previous video where I show you you can paint this rice paper so many colors, and it takes the paint beautifully because it is rice paper. They're made in Italy, and it's rice paper. It's got some fibers in it, and it's highly absorbent. You can gel print it. You can bleed the color through it. But one of the things that I really like doing with this paper is, and both of them, is to put them on a canvas board with gel medium, and then I knocked back the heavy black print with a layer of watered down gesso. So you can see that it toned it back significantly where it would make a good background. I had thought I would put a bird or a flower or a butterfly on this because it has all those botanical elements. So if you're interested in the Bees and Bugs or the U.S. mail, that is back in stock. But what I really want to show you today is this because of that beautiful blue print. So I've got 3 different designs. I've got this one. Lots of that one. So that's the first one. This is the second one. I got some sheets so we can experiment with. And then the third one. I really like this one that's got the lady with the seashells. So these are the three different designs. And I thought that they would be a lot of fun to paint in tones of blue. So I've got blues and purples out, and I just wanted to show you a couple of techniques. The first one being that I know we all love teal, and teal... Oh, and I think this one isn't open. Let me get one that's open. It's pristine and beautiful. Ah, here it is. So teal is opaque. You can see that when teal goes over the black on the container and the tick marks on the label, you can see very clearly here that the tick marks are hard to see under the teal. You can see them on the gold, and you can see them really well on this ultramarine violet, but you don't see them on the teal. So we wouldn't want to put the teal over the top of this because we would obliterate the majority of the art. If you watered it down a lot, you would probably get this effect like I did with the gesso. But I've got another tip for you that's a lot of fun. Because this is rice paper, the paint will soak all the way through it, and you can paint it from the backside. As I said, you can also gel print these, and you can experiment with gel printing them. But today I wanted to show you some other ideas. So I'm going to put out some of this teal on a sheet of palette paper here, because the best way to deal with very wet papers is to put them on a palette sheet so that you can then pick them up and move them off to the side without having to pick up a drippy, wet piece of paper and without having it stick to your desk. So this is a palette sheet that's shiny on the front side, and so it will, the paper will not stick to that when it's drying. So I'm going to put out some of the teal. When we put it on the back with the water, we're going to let it bleed all the way through the front, and we are going to clearly see the graphics without the effect of the teal going over the top. That's a little messy. So what I'm going to do is now, rather than make the whole sheet teal, which I thought I was going to do initially, we could add some more blue. So here's a cerulean blue, which is similar to the blue in the print. So I'm going to now bring some water and some of that cerulean blue and let that blend into the teal. And you want it watery so it blends all the way through, but you don't want to water it too down because you want these colors to stay intense. And I'm just going to let it blend into the teal. And then when I pick it up and show you, you can see that now we're gradually going from the teal to that cerulean blue. That's a beautiful color. So now I can come back. Oh, I'm just picking up some of the color from the palette sheet, which will give you a nice sort of a speckly pattern if you want a speckly pattern, but I want to have this with full color. So I'm going to come back now with the water and the teal, and now I'm going to bring teal and let that run into my cerulean blue. Now I've also got the speckle pattern that I'm going to go over, and I think you're probably going to see that as well. You can either do that on the palette sheet or you can tap and splatter for a speckle pattern. So this one we're going to do like that, and then I'm going to come in with a ultramarine blue. That's an appropriate color for the Aquatic Life paper. So the ultramarine blue, I'm going to let that blend into the teal. So now we should have a really nice watery sheet. And I'm picking this up to show you, but I would suggest you leave it down so that you can let it dry. But look at how beautiful this looks. Oh, that ultramarine with the color soaked all the way through. And you know what happens when the color soaks all the way through? When we tear this rice paper, it will have blue edges. And I thought that I would let this dry and put a little gold splatter on top of it. Now, you can put the splatter on it when it's wet, and because it's rice paper and it's so absorbent, the splatters will absorb out. So we could try that, because when you put it on it when it's wet, they'll absorb out. And if you wait until the paper's dry, they'll stay a little more concise in the splatters. So we could do both. We could add some that bleed out, and then we could let it dry and come back and add some on the top. So to do the splatter on top of the blue with the gold, I'm going to put out a little gold on the palette sheet. Now we have the paper face up. And I'm going to get water in the brush, and I am going to tap it. Whoops, that was not a light tap. Tap it. The more water, the bigger blobs you get. So the less water, you'll have smaller, and the further away. So you have to sort of experiment with the tapping. But this has a lot of water in it. The brush was full of water. So this is going to block out some of the pattern because metallics tend to do that. They're a little bit more opaque, and we are applying it from the front. But it's going to soak in to a certain degree because it's not perfectly dry. But I do like the way that that's blending. And if you feel like it's too much, you can come back in with a rice paper and just give it a light touch on top. And that'll back off some of that metallic. So, oh, that's really coming out nice. And the other thing that we can do now is we can also splatter another blue on top. So for like little splatters, here's an anthracnone blue. That's a very dark blue. And I'm going to get less water in the brush this time. There we go. A little less water and tap it. There, we see the smaller dots now because I have much less water. So smaller dots with less water, larger dots with more water. And here I'm adding some more speckle splatter to the top of this with the anthracnone blue, which is a really nice deep dark blue. So now I've got a couple of colors sort of bled through the back and some colors splattered on the front. And aside from my big droplet here, maybe I can lift some of that with this. Probably not. That's on there for good. So now you can see that this is really sort of taking on this beautiful aquatic kind of blue purple blend. So I love the fact that we can soak this color all the way through the rice paper with a little bit of water, and we can soak it in from the back, leaving the graphics vibrant, but soaking the color from the back. And now we're getting, also when we tear this, we're going to have blue edges. So the other, so let's set this aside. And let's look at it with like a purple. So we'll set that aside, and this is dangerous because I'm setting it on top of another project. I want to look at the seashell lady. That one is really fun. This one, because it has a seahorse on it. I love that. So you can see the seahorse. I love seahorses. I saw them at the aquarium in Chattanooga, and they were amazing. Okay, so also, we could mount the blue papers to a canvas panel and go over them with white gesso, or we could go over them with nothing and leave them like this, or you could go over them with a color on the top. There's a lot of different ways you could subdue the pattern and put a collage on the top of this background. The other thing you can do is to tear out some of the elements and add them to your own collage work. You can also layer this over a colored background. There's a lot of different things you can do with the rice paper layering. But let's find that lady with the seashells. Here she is. This blue that it's printed in is a dark blue. I would say it has a little bit of a hint of a purple. So I thought that the ultramarine violet might be nice on it. So again, I'm going to add water, and I'm going to, this time I'll go from the front because this is a very translucent color. So it's going to allow the graphics to show through no problem on the front. So let's get that, and I'm going to speckle it, actually. I'm going to splatter it. So rather than painting solid color, this time I'm going to get water in my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to splatter a couple of different colors in here. And when I get a lot of water in there, because this is rice paper, it is bleeding out, absorbing into the paper and expanding. So the little droplets, when you add a lot of water, go a long way in this rice paper. So that's the light purple. This is already getting sort of a cool ocean feel. And the next color I'm going to come in with is manganese blue. So that's another highly translucent color. And I'm going to put that also on the front because I don't have to worry about it blocking out my graphics. Get a lot of water. And now I'm going to splatter this with the ultramarine violet. I think a little silver metallic would also look nice with this because it is a cool color palette, and gold is lovely as well. But gold is a warm color, so we could experiment with adding a cool color to the cool color of the blues and purples. So you can see how this splatter is bleeding and blending, and my goal here is to fill it all, but to have it have this sort of splattery, watery look, which is different than this watery look that we blended from the back, where I went from the ultramarine to the teal to the cerulean to the teal. This is kind of meandering and blending. So the next color I'm going to do with this is, let's see, I don't want to do anything that's opaque on the top. Let me see if I can find some silver. So I don't have silver per se, but I do have some interference, which is sort of an iridescent blue. And I also have, this is a pearlescent. So this pearlescent is going to be white and pearly. Let's see what that looks like, because that's cool. And we'll add that. Ooh, that's really cool, because that's kind of going over. Now this is going to be like the gold. It's going to be a little bit more opaque on there, and it's going to block some things out. So we're not going to go too heavy with it, but I'm really going to like the way that it gives that shimmer with the pearlescent. And the interference blue could do something similar as well. The interference blue you can also blend in with a paint color to give it an iridescent. So let's think about that for a minute. Now, I want to get a slightly darker color in here, I think. So I'm going to go with the phthalo blue red shade. That is a really beautiful sort of pure medium blue. So I'm going to put that out. Medium, it's a little dark actually, but it's not as dark as anthracnone. So let's get that on the brush with some water. Oop, oh, too much water, way too much water. Okay, a little less. That's a dark, bold color, so I don't want to go too heavy with that. And I'm splattering that over. So now I have the ultramarine violet, the manganese blue, and the pearlescent shimmer, and this phthalo blue red shade that got way too dark in those couple of spots. So again, I can come back with some rice paper and kind of come on the top and see if I can lift some of that a little bit and blend it a little bit. So this is a way you can get a sort of beautiful wet watery. It's obscuring the pattern a little bit more than I thought it would, but that's not necessarily too bad. I think we could take a brush and go over it a little bit and smooth it down a little. We'll still have that marbled effect of the color, but I'll just kind of tone back some of the dot pattern. So are we having fun yet? I am really enjoying messing around with these rice papers. This is what I call permission to play, really. I am just adding the blues and the teals and the metallics and the splatter, and I'm just messing around. I'm trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, what effect I like and what effect I maybe don't like so much. I encourage you to do this, to just give yourself permission to get out there and play with your art supplies and see what happens and figure out what works and maybe write it down when it does work. So the next thing I want to try with the, let's see, we've got these two with this design. It's got the octopus tentacles, which I love, and these fun big fish and the nautical anchor. And they all have screened in the background some nautical maps that are lighter and screened back. So this one is this effect I'd like to try is going from the back to make sure we don't obscure the pattern, and using some of the interference blue. Here it is, the interference blue, and I'm going to blend that to give sort of an iridescent pattern to a manganese, little bit of manganese mixed with a little bit of ultramarine violet. So we should have a nice purpley blue kind of iridescent here. You can see how the interference makes the paint, gives the paint sort of an iridescent effect, and I can add more to get more of that effect. So that's the interference blue fine and water, and I'm going to apply that to the back. And we'll see if we can get a shimmery feeling on the front. Now you can water it down and get a lighter, paler paint application, obviously, or you could use a little less water and go heavier. You just need to have enough water for it to soak through the paper. So, and that doesn't really require tons of water. So here, I'm gonna, you can see the darker and the lighter effect with that. And it's probably a little hard to see the iridescent shimmer to it until it dries, but I've got another idea with that. Let's soak some more of this through the back. And then I'm going to try putting the interference over the top. Get this straight. This is why you want to work on a palette sheet. Okay, and then I'm going to try putting the interference on the front. Adding a little bit of that iridescent shimmer. So there you can see sort of the iridescent shimmer, and it also tones back the pattern a little bit for a more subtle approach if you want to put artwork or printed pieces or other elements on top of this and use this as a background. So the sort of the taffeta iridescent effect of the interference helps to subdue the pattern on the front. The next technique I want to show you is how to gel print a solid smooth color onto the surface of this beautiful nautical rice paper. So I've got my 12 by 12 gel plate here, and I'm going to use some manganese blue. So I'm going to put a decent amount of the manganese blue out and roll it out in a nice thin layer. I'm going to put the design side down into the paint. Make sure you have good contact and pull. And here we picked up a little bit of stuff off the gel plate. That's the way the gel plate works. But a nice light manganese blue on the rice paper, giving it a blue hue and allowing all of the graphics to show through. So with the gel printed color on top of the paper, it is dry right away, unlike the stuff that we soak through the back and saturated with the splatter. So when we want to splatter on top of this, we can get the dry splattering into dry effect that I was talking about versus wet, because this is totally dry as soon as I pull it. So I'm going to take my gold paint in the brush and tap it, and I've got less water so I can get smaller droplets of gold on top of this sheet. And I'm working with the splatter into the dry paint on the surface of the rice paper. So this is going to be a different splatter effect because I'm not working into wet, I'm working into dry. And I used a little less water on this so my splatter dots are small. You can also see that the splatter dots are going to hold tighter, and that's because we're on a dry sheet. So those dots are not bleeding and blending out as much as they did on the first sheet, which has really started to blend. It bleeds as it absorbs into the rice paper. So this is the gold on wet effect, which is nice and watery. And this is the gold on dry effect, which you have the dry effect as soon as you pull it off the gel plate, or if you wait for your wet and watery paper to dry. So that is a really beautiful effect with the gold splatter on the dry printed paper. The next effect I want to show you is the iridescent pearl fine splattered on the gel printed dried ultramarine violet paper. The iridescent pearl fine is sort of like a white silver, so it's different than the gold. I'm going to add water to my brush and tap it. I think I need to put out a little bit more paint. And that is going to look really kind of interesting over the purple. And remember, this is gel printed, so immediately it's dry, and you can do the dry into dry splatter effect. You can also combine your splatter colors. So now I've got the pearl iridescent, and I'm also going to add a little bit of teal splatter on top of that. So two tones of splatter on dry gel printed rice paper. So again, more water means bigger splatter dots. So I'm going with a little less water so that I don't block out too much of the pattern. And I'm doing the teal into the pearlescent into the gel printed ultramarine violet. So now you can see another way to colorize the paper in the beautiful colors of the Aquatic Life. Just like you can use the paper and put it into splatter on the palette sheet, you can also put some wet and watery effects on your gel plate and soak some of that through the back. So here's another gel printed ultramarine violet sheet, which is immediately dry. And I'm going to put out some gold and some teal onto the gel plate, and then I'm going to add some water, which will sort of bead up on the gel plate. It'll give an interesting effect that is similar to the palette paper, if not the same. And I'm going to add that to the gel printed sheet by laying it over from the back and giving it a little bit of a watery combo with the gold and the teal now coming through the solid gel printed from the front. So I really like the way this gives that watery look. Let me put that on a sheet of palette paper. So it gives a nice watery look. It's a little different than the palette paper, the way that it beads up on the gel plate. But here you can see I've added some more modeling and color combos with the gold, and the purple is really nice, and just soaked it through with the gel printing on the front. The next effect I want to share with you is splattering the gold paint onto the gel plate and letting it set up for a little bit, and taking the gel printed piece of collage paper that is completely dry and then putting it into the gold splatter to add another layer of mottled color over the top. So that's another way to apply the splatter, is to actually put it right on the gel plate. So that's a little harder to see the pattern. And this one is definitely easier. Well, that's it for this week. As usual, all the links for the products, including the fancy rice paper, are down below the video in the information box. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me here in the studio. I enjoy the comments. If you would like to leave a comment, I respond to all of them. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my content, think about subscribing. And please visit my website for all kinds of good stuff, paperpaintings.com. Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you right here next week.